Hi, I'm Kate Redhead from the Primary Science Teaching Trust. I am a regional mentor. I'm based in the West Midlands, although at the moment working remotely like almost everyone. And I'm here today to talk to you about what a lot of schools are calling recovery planning. Some schools are calling it gap planning. So essentially, plans to address the missed science curriculum that has happened during the time of COVID, during this strange time that we all find ourselves in. And I'm going to start by really stating, trying to overstate almost, to beware the temptation to cram. It obviously depends on your individual school as to the plans that the SLT may want you to put in place. But the thought of trying to do possibly 4 or 5 months of missed topics, missed teaching into the following academic year, the year of 2021, is actually could possibly be to the detriment of you and to the detriment of the children. It's really thinking about the fact that you don't need to cover all of those gaps immediately. Thinking about your pupil and staff well-being. Everyone's been away from school in terms of driving curriculum forward, in terms of how we would normally operate in a school. That has not been in place since the middle, the end of March. Children and teachers, it's going to take a while for us all to get used to being back in that environment. We're not going to be as up to speed as normal. So to try and cram lots of extra things into the curriculum all in the next year could possibly be really quite a challenge. The learning's likely to be superficial. You could lose your practical science and engaging dialogue. You might miss misconceptions, and you might actually end up to gaps widening between those children that have engaged with science during the time of lockdown at home or in school, if perhaps they're part of a key worker group, and those children who haven't engaged. So much better then to think, what's a long-term approach going to look like? That's what I'm going to take you through today. And a long-term approach is thinking about linking what's been missed to embed the new learning. And there are opportunities. There are opportunities for our pedagogy to change and adapt. The possibility of using the outdoors, the risk of infection outdoors, we know is so much less. The fact that science is everywhere, the daily briefings when they were happening, the news constantly, scientists and everything being based on science is much more part of our dialogue than it was before. So that's an opportunity. We know that there is a big push to think about maths and literacy as the children in their greater numbers return to school. So cross-curricular links are a real focus. They always are important, but perhaps here even more so. The phrase core subjects is being bandied around a lot, and it's just really trying to make sure that everyone is clear that science, primary science, it is a core subject, but putting those cross-curricular links in place can't hurt. Okay, so we need to think then about where things currently stand in terms of coverage. Where were we at the point of lockdown? Our subject overview, if we've got that in place as a subject lead, hopefully we have, hopefully it's accurate, and we're clear on our knowledge and our skills as a result of that. From that, we might be able to see what's been completely missed, what's been partly covered. We've also got home learning and what's been going on in school to consider. So it could be as a school that your home learning has really sought to drive learning forward, that you have covered new content during that time, that you have had high engagement with that home learning content. What's been happening in school? What are your numbers of key worker children? that have been in school the whole time? What about your year groups that have returned since June the 1st? Have you got a high number of those children? Have you got a large percentage of that year group that have been in place? And has learning been moving forward in terms of science? What topics have been covered? Now, most of the schools that I'm working with feel that their numbers have been so low since June the 1st that really they're going to be discounting what's been covered in school since the lockdown in terms of their curriculum coverage. There haven't been nearly enough children for them to be able to count that. They'll want to be addressing those topics. And many schools as well aren't feeling that the engagement with home learning has been high enough for them to be able to count that either as coverage. So most schools, but you will think about your school and how your school has reacted and how the engagement has been in place for home learning and in school. Most schools are looking at where were we at the point of lockdown? What was covered before that in terms of knowledge and skills? And so where are our gaps? And the best place to start with that is your topic overview. So thinking about the topics that you've plotted out as a science leader over the course of the year. Is this valid? Is this as it's shown in your school? Is it reflected by what's happening in class? And thinking about this one as a particular example, in this example, the schools in their second spring half term, they have a half term topic called Science Adventures, which is a whole school theme that's based around the Science Week drive. In this year, just gone or just nearly finished, this half term for the school was the shortest one, so they put it there for that reason too. But they have the Science Week, the theme, and they really concentrate on working scientifically skills, and they engage with real scientists during that time. They do make sure that the skills are embedded across the curriculum, across all the topic areas, but this school has taken the choice to use that half term as a sort of belt and braces approach. It might be something that you like to consider, or you might think, nope, that wouldn't work for our school. You know your school, you know your children. So for this school in particular, living things in their habitats, evolution and inheritance hasn't been covered by those year 6 children. And so highlighting those is a means of remembering that that needs to be discussed in those transition conversations with the secondary schools that are being fed into. Main concern then for us as primary school practitioners, for those children that are going to be coming up in the year groups in September, are the topics that have been missed. And this particular school, the half term for spring 2, perhaps less of a consideration because there's no specific topic being covered, but we might need to think about when we come on to skills. At the moment, we're just thinking about the knowledge side. So again, taking this as an example, I'm going to look first of all at year 5, because year 5 is a bit of a standalone year because it's the only group of children where we only have them for one more year at primary. So although the initial message of this talk is try not to cram, try not to squeeze it all into the next academic year, unfortunately with year 5, there isn't really a choice. So animals, including humans, and earth and space, we need to be trying to find a space for those in the 2021 academic topic overview. We need to include space for that. So those are the ones that were missed. We've got animals, including humans, there at the top, which is the changes objective. And then we've got the earth and space objectives. More objectives in that topic, but we need to think about where our possible links are. Obviously, we need to think about those links all being in year 6, the 1 year we have left with them. And then we need to take some decisions as to when it will be covered. And this is where I just want to reference Liz Lawrence from the ASE. She's worked with some schools in Stoke, and they put together this progression document. And this shows you might have something similar in your school, but this shows how the different topics are met over the course of a child's time at primary school. And you can see some of those topics run through, some of them are only met once. So the two that we're looking at for year 5, we're looking at animals, including humans, which is actually a topic that's covered in every single year group. And we're also looking at Earth and Space, which is a standalone. And it's thinking carefully about that when we try to establish our links. And what I want to show you here is that the links to where you seek to place your missed topics, to where you seek those links, they don't have to necessarily be the science curriculum. You might have a super theme curriculum that links particularly well with one of your missed units. Go for it if you have. In this example here with the changes curriculum, you can see there's possible links to the evolution topic in year 6. There are also possible links to animals, including humans, in year 6. But equally outside the science curriculum, there are links to PSHE, the relationships education and SRE. So there are options there for when it might be covered, and you know your school best. You can think about how it can work best to address those gaps. In terms of Earth and Space, really tenuous links, but they seems to be more strongly linked to light than anything else. So possibly trying to think about including it round about the same time as year as we tackle light. So then making some decisions. So when will it be covered? Well, I'll explain why I chose animals, including humans, from those different options. But in terms of Earth and Space, light, we're going to keep it with light. How does that affect our overview for the coming year? Well, you can see there in year 6 that light, Earth and Space, I'm going to think about keeping those close together. Maybe I'll do one followed by the other. I'll take some decisions with the year 6 team on that. But the changes objective, I've decided, is going to go in that first half term with animals, including humans, instead of evolution, because I'd be concerned we might be doing the children a disservice if we leave it right till the end of the year 6 year. So there's no right answer here. It's making the best decision with what you have. So what we've done now then is we've actually got 2 year groups that are dealt with for the next academic year. Year 6 we've just talked about, the year 6 coming up in September, that is, and year 1 coming up from reception. Their topics can remain as they are. We might need to think carefully about the amount of transition time for year 1 from their reception learning, because they've had so much time away from school. But in terms of the topic overview, that should stand quite well. So what have we got left to look at? Back to our topic overview, we need to be thinking about the gaps for these year groups. And in contrast to the year 5 going into year 6, these year groups have got a longer period of time in which to address those gaps. So I'm going to jump to year 3. Year 3 missed rocks and they missed plants. And I'm jumping to year 3 because as they go into year 4, they've got year 4, they've got year 5, and they've got year 6. So I've got 3 possible year groups that I can think about having that long-term vision for establishing, for addressing, the gaps that have opened up. So thinking first about rocks, I've got here my national curriculum statements for rocks, and I need to think about the possible links. So rocks and plants. Rocks, if we think back to the progression overview, can be seen as a standalone. Plants runs through years 1, 2, and 3. So quite different topics to approach, but a really important tool to point out to you here, if you've not seen it before, is the plan assessment site. The web address is there at the bottom of the page. And what the plan resources do is they have very detailed progression documents. Now, this is a screenshot from the knowledge matrices document. So what it's done in the knowledge matrices document is it's looked at each of the modules in turn and looked at their flow through the primary curriculum, but not just when they are repeated as a standalone unit, where plants 1, 2, 3, as an example, but where they've got other links to other science units. So the objectives that are given there in red are linked to rocks. There are links to be made, but they're not necessarily labelled as a rocks unit. So that's the difference. And you can see that there are quite a lot of strong links there to everyday materials. So going back then to year 3, rocks, what are our possible links? Well, when we're thinking about grouping different types of rocks based on their appearance and simple properties, when we're thinking about soils, really that links very nicely to year 5 materials. Thinking in simple terms about how fossils are formed, well, that links really nicely to the year 6 evolution topic. So quite different then to the year 5 gap planning that we just did. When we're thinking about our year 3 cohort, they're going to be year 4 next year. But in terms of plugging the gap of the rocks curriculum that's been missed, I'm not going to look at that next year. I'm going to look at part of it the year after and part of it when they get into year 6. And it's important just to think, when we make those decisions, what does it actually mean? What does it look like? Well, it means that in the year 21, 22, they'll be doing this, and so on. Thinking carefully about that and thinking about that long-term view. Plants, again, got my national curriculum statements, and again, I'm going to the plan progression document to look at plants. And as I mentioned earlier, plants runs through 1, 2, and 3, and then isn't looked at again, but you can see here, this is where the documents from plan resources come in so usefully. You can see here really strong links to living things and their habitats. And so looking at that, you can see you've got options. It could be that you're covering it in year 4 or year 5 or year 6. Now, I know that in terms of addressing my gaps in rocks, I'm going to be covering those in year 5 and in year 6. So my links I'm going to make for plants, I'm going to do it next year. And I'm going to plug this gap in the children's time in year 4. So that is going to be covered in the academic year of 2021. How does that affect my curriculum overview for next year? Well, plants is the one that I'm thinking about next year. I'm going to link it to living things and their habitats. So again, I've slotted it in. Again, I've lost my science adventures half term. That's fine. I'm going to be making sure working scientifically is running throughout. And I could have a bit of a play around with that order depending on a discussion with those year group teachers. But essentially, that's a year group that I've dealt with. However, how do I remember that I've got gap planning in place for the following year groups? And that's, I think, where as a subject leader, we need to be quite tight on how we record it and what systems we put in place so that this lovely planning doesn't get lost. And this is where I would advise a one sheet, whether it's online or on paper, a one sheet recovery plan for each year group. So one sheet of A4 that tells you, that tells the year 3 team how you're addressing the gaps in the science curriculum from this strange time that we find ourselves in. Well, in terms of knowledge for year 3, here's the information. It's the start of my recovery plan for year 3, because obviously I've got to add skills on, which we're going to get to. But this tells me exactly what I'm doing, and if I'm not sure, I can refer to it easily. As a science leader, I can use it as a means of checking that those gaps are being covered, of next year informing my topic overview, making sure those gaps are being covered, and then also thinking about that handover to the next class teacher, handover to any possible subsequent science leaders. So we're really clear and that this planning doesn't get lost. In terms of assessment then, how do we know where the children are? How do we know what those gaps are? Because so far, really, we've just talked about coverage. And we've also briefly mentioned the fact that some children will have been engaging well with science at home and some children may not. So when should we do some sort of assessment to see where the children are? Don't be tempted towards summative assessment. Assessment for learning works so well. We keep to our assessment for learning to find out where the children are. When do we need to do it? Well, we need to do it prior to the catch-up work. So I'm not going to be doing any sort of assessment of the children's knowledge of rocks. I know that that gap is there. We haven't covered it. I don't need to put them or myself through any sort of assessment to see where they are next year. I'm not actually addressing it until later in their primary school time. How am I going to do it? Well, I need to think about prompting dialogue, and I need to do that so that I can adapt. And there are lots of ideas here for how you might elicit understanding from the children. And so looking at those first three, odd one out, what's going on, big questions, all superb parts of the Explorify resource. And if you haven't used Explorify yet, I really would urge you to register. It's free. Super AFL activities on there. Concept cartoons would be really useful, as would vocab sorts, matching games, maybe even quizzes. Images that are shared in the Why and How newsletter are really good for prompting dialogue and discussion. And that's something, the Why and How newsletter is something that you can sign up for free on the PSTT website. Modelling with foil and play is a great way of seeing whether or not children have got much understanding of what it is that you're about to embark upon. And then we've got old favourites like mind maps and KWL grids. So just remembering that those options are out there. Thinking then about skills. In a similar way to knowledge, we need to know what's being covered. Can you tell what's being covered in terms of skills from your overview and from your school planning? You might be able to. Or is it more difficult? I think skills is a bit more tricky in this respect. And it might be that if it is more difficult, you think about sharing a working scientifically progression document, and I'll share one with you in a second. You share that with staff, then they can actually tell you what they think has been covered and what they think really hasn't. And they can also tell you, if you can't tell that from your overview, which of the 5 areas of science inquiry have perhaps been missed. So you're researching over time, comparative and fair testing, pattern seeking, sorting and classifying, and you're observing over time. Which of those have been covered? Which of those are going to really need to be picked up in the coming year? And this is a progression document that could support you in this. Now, we know that skills runs over a phase, so years 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. And in the plan resources, again, going to the plan resources, these are the skills matrices documents. So there's one of these for each of the phases there. And what you are able to do with that is you're able to establish yourself or with the teachers of that year group, were there any specific skills missed, and have any of those 5 areas been missed? So if we go to the year 3 example, so I'm thinking about my my gap recovery document for year 3 that we began together on knowledge. In terms of skills, what's been missed? Well, working with the year 3 teachers, I established that these 2 objectives really haven't been touched upon. So I need to think about how to plan for that in the coming year. And they also tell me that they haven't done any pattern seeking. So very similar to knowledge, what's been missed? thinking about the possible links that we could make with the curriculum and when it will be covered. Now with skills, I don't think there's any option. I think you've got to make sure that you are getting in these gaps covered in the coming year. I think that's really, really important. And so it could be a science leader that, like I have here, you think about possible ideas for where it could link to the curriculum that the children are coming into. It might be that you think you have time and you think of more than one option for those teachers. It might be that you ask those teachers to make those links, but it's definitely got to be covered in year 4. And so that then completes my recovery plan document for year 3. I've got my knowledge, I've got my skills, and I know when things are going to be covered. I can use it as a reminder for teachers, a reminder for myself. I can use it as a moderation tool and a monitoring tool to make sure that it is actually happening. And I can also use it this time next year when I come to put together my topic overview for the following year, because those gaps still need to be thought about for those children as they progress through. It could be that this is something that you keep in a paper-based format and you scribble on the class name at the top. It might be that it's online, whatever works for you. But for me, having one sheet of A4 for each year group makes it quite workable and easy to interact with. Another important point to put out to put in place to point out here is that because you're taking a long-term view, we don't know where we're going to be in September. We don't know what our uptake is going to be. The government are expecting everyone to be back in school in September. If that happens, brilliant. If we don't have another spike, fantastic. We want to get back to normal. But if there is a significant attendance drop, if there is another closure, goodness hope that there isn't, but if there were to be, then you could return to this document, this one sheet for the year group, and you could think, well, how does what's happening now affect this? And it's not going to affect absolutely everything because you're taking the long-term view. So things that are in place for year 5 and year 6 remain as they are. And you can think about whether or not it affects what you've got in place for next year and whether any additional gaps have arisen. So hopefully that's one useful way of thinking about gap planning, about recovery planning. How about ideas for assessment for learning for your skills? Well, practical activities that promote dialogue are really important. If we go back to our ideas list for knowledge, there are lots of skills there that can be assessed using those tools. But specifically skills focused are the TAPS focused assessment tasks. And the link is at the bottom here of the slide. If you haven't come across them before, TAPS focused assessment tasks, practical activities that focus on a specific working scientifically area for that year group, for that topic. And there is an overview on the website given in the link there as to which areas of working scientifically are covered. And this is an example of one of the focused assessment tasks, one sheet of A4, a super activity with clues for cues for adapting the activity and questions to support teachers, but vitally important at the bottom, those assessment indicators that allow teachers to make a solid decision in terms of a valid assessment of where those children are. And that's, I think, where the real strength of this resource lies. So in terms of AFL, where are the children in terms of their skills? Some ideas there. So coming to a close then, really important, don't panic. Everyone in every school is in the same situation, and some sort of plan is better than no plan. You're not on your own, and there is help if you need it. That's my email address. As I said at the start, I am based in the West Midlands, but I am very happy to support people remotely. And I also have superb regional mentor colleagues who are dotted around other parts of the UK that I might be able to put you in touch with if you feel that was more appropriate for you. Remember as well, there are positives, there are opportunities arising as a result of this horrible, horrible time that we've all been experiencing. Thinking specifically online tools, the use of online tools and the way of being able to reach out to people, I think has changed for the better. And I think lots of the different skills that we've developed over this time, we will continue with and not necessarily see as a bad side. It's perhaps the silver lining of what's been happening. So thinking about then our long-term solutions, not going for quick fixes and trying to avoid cramming to support ourselves and our children as we return to school in September. I hope you found that useful.